You have been lied to your entire life about what it means to be productive. Every motivational guru, every hustle culture podcast, every wake up at 4 a.m. influencer has sold you the same broken idea that doing more is always the answer. But the Stoics, those brilliantly unbothered philosophers who ran empires and survived exile and watched everything they loved get taken away, they figured something out that most people today will never understand. Stillness is not laziness. It is the most dangerous weapon a disciplined mind can carry. Here are 10 reasons the quiet power of doing nothing might be the most radical self-improvement strategy you have never tried. Number 1. Your brain is not a machine. It is a muscle that needs rest to grow stronger. Here is something that will make every productivity bro on your feed deeply uncomfortable. Some of the sharpest thinking in human history happened during deliberate pauses, not frantic action. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, a man who was literally enslaved and still built one of the most respected philosophical schools in ancient Rome, taught that the mind needs space the way lungs need air. You cannot inhale and inhale and inhale forever. At some point you exhale. At some point you stop. And that stopping is not a failure. It is biology. Modern neuroscience actually backs this up with something called the default mode network, which is the part of your brain that fires up when you are doing nothing. It is responsible for creativity, problem solving, and emotional regulation. Every time you kill a moment of boredom by reaching for your phone, you are basically interrupting a board meeting happening inside your own skull. But here is where it gets really interesting, because doing nothing is not actually about doing nothing at all. Number 2, the Stoics did not call it rest. They called it preparation. Marcus Aurelius, and yes, we are going there, but not in the way you expect, wrote something in his private journal that most people completely skip over. He did not write about glory or conquest. He wrote about sitting with his thoughts before sunrise and asking himself what kind of person he intended to be that day, not what he intended to do, who he intended to be. That is a massive difference. What looked like a Roman emperor doing nothing was actually a man doing the hardest work of his life, inner work, the kind that does not show up on a to-do list but shows up in every decision you make for the rest of the day. Most people plan their calendars and forget to plan their character. The Stoics thought that was completely backwards. And if you think that kind of inner stillness sounds nice but impractical, wait until you hear what it does to your decision-making. Number 3. Stillness is not the absence of action. It is the absence of reaction. Think about the last time you sent a text you regretted, made a financial decision out of panic, or said something in an argument that you had to spend 3 days apologizing for. What was missing in all of those moments? A pause, a single breath of space between what happened to you and how you responded. The Stoic term for this is the space between stimulus and response, and it is the single most underrated life skill in existence. Viktor Frankl, who is not technically a Stoic but lived Stoic philosophy under conditions that would break most people, described this gap as the location of all human freedom. Not freedom from circumstance, freedom within it. Doing nothing for 5 seconds before you react is not passivity, it is power wearing a disguise. And what you do with that pause depends entirely on the next point, which most self-help content completely ignores. Number 4, clarity is not something you find. It is something you create by removing noise. Picture your mind like a snow globe. When life is shaking you constantly, all you see is chaos, swirling white, zero visibility. But when you set it down and let it settle, suddenly you can see what is actually inside. The Stoic practice of solitude was not about isolation. It was about intentional settling, letting the noise drop so you could see what was real. Seneca wrote, and this is a translation most people have not encountered, that a person who does not know how to be alone in their own mind will always be running from something. He was describing the 21st century and the 1st century AD. He was describing every person who cannot sit in a waiting room for 4 minutes without opening Instagram. The ability to be alone with your thoughts without flinching is a superpower, and right now it might be the rarest one on the planet. But solitude without intention is just boredom. And that brings us to something the Stoics were absolutely ruthless about. Number 5. You are not actually resting. You are just consuming faster. Here is a distinction that will genuinely change how you think about your downtime. There is a difference between passive recovery and passive consumption. Passive recovery, lying in a park, sitting quietly, a slow walk with no podcast playing, that actually restores your cognitive bandwidth. Passive consumption, scrolling short-form video, binge-watching with your phone in your hand, jumping between tabs, that drains the exact same resources you were trying to refill. The Stoics called the undisciplined mind, one that is at the mercy of every impression that passes through it. Every notification, every headline, every algorithmically optimized piece of content designed to trigger just enough emotion to keep you clicking. That is not rest. That is your attention being harvested while you think you are relaxing. Real stillness requires you to protect the silence, aggressively, unapologetically, even when it feels weird, especially when it feels weird. And the reason it feels weird, that is exactly what we are digging into next. Number 6. You have been trained to feel guilty for being still, and that guilt is costing you everything. This one stings a little, so stay with it. Western culture, particularly in the United States, has built an identity around busyness. Saying you are busy is practically a status symbol. Saying you spent Sunday afternoon sitting on your porch doing absolutely nothing sounds like a confession. We have culturally equated stillness with laziness, silence with apathy, and rest with failure. The Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, who is criminally underread compared to his more famous students, argued that the person who cannot find peace in simplicity will never find peace at all. Not in achievement, not in wealth, not in recognition, because peace is an internal condition, not an external reward. The guilt you feel when you stop is not your conscience, it is your conditioning. And conditioning can be unlearned. Here is the uncomfortable part though. Unlearning it means confronting something most people will do almost anything to avoid. Number 7. Boredom is not the enemy of a disciplined mind. It is the entrance exam. Every great idea, every creative breakthrough, every moment of genuine self-awareness you have ever had, trace it back, and you will almost always find boredom sitting right before it, like a waiting room. Boredom is uncomfortable because it forces you to be present with yourself, with no entertainment, no distraction, no external stimulation to hide behind. And for a lot of people, being alone with themselves is genuinely terrifying. The Stoics were not afraid of that discomfort. They walked straight into it. Cato the Younger, one of the most disciplined humans who ever drew breath, would deliberately practice discomfort, cold, hunger, walking barefoot in public, not because he was performing toughness for an audience, but because he understood that a mind which cannot tolerate discomfort will always be controlled by whoever offers relief from it. Boredom is just discomfort with a boring name, and learning to sit inside it without flinching is how you stop being manipulable by anything that promises to make you feel better fast. But there is a specific kind of stillness the Stoics practiced that goes way beyond just tolerating silence. And it is probably the most counterintuitive thing on this entire list. Number 8. The Stoics practiced imagining loss, and it made them unshakable. This one sounds dark on the surface, so stick with it, because the payoff is massive. The Stoic practice, called negative visualization, involves deliberately imagining that the things you value most, your health, your relationships, your income, your comfort, are gone, not to spiral into anxiety, not to catastrophize, but to genuinely feel how much you already have right now in this moment. Epictetus pointed out that most human suffering comes not from actual loss, but from the gap between what we expect and what we get. We stop noticing what is good because we have already moved on mentally to wanting what is next. Negative visualization closes that gap. It pulls you back into the present with a kind of gratitude that no journaling prompt or morning affirmation can manufacture. The quiet moment where you sit and think about what your life would look like without the things you take for granted is not morbid. It is medicine. It is the fastest known cure for chronic dissatisfaction. And speaking of dissatisfaction, there is one modern habit that the Stoics would have absolutely roasted if they were alive today. Number 9. Constant optimization is just anxiety wearing a productivity costume. You know the type. Maybe you are the type. Always reading the next book on habits before finishing the last one. always tweaking the morning routine, always researching the best system for the best system, grinding not because there is a clear goal, but because stopping feels dangerous. Because if you stop optimizing, you might have to ask yourself whether you are actually moving towards something meaningful or just staying busy to avoid that question entirely. The Stoic concept of amor fati, loving what is, not just tolerating it, but genuinely embracing it, is the philosophical antidote to this particular flavor of modern anxiety. It does not mean you stop improving. It means you stop treating the present moment like a problem to be solved before real life can begin. Real life is happening right now, in the pauses, in the stillness, in the moments between doing where you actually get to experience being alive instead of just executing tasks. Here is the thing though. None of this means you become passive. In fact, the final point is where all of this clicks into something genuinely actionable. Number 10. Doing nothing strategically is what makes everything else you do actually land. Think about archery. The moment of stillness right before release is not wasted time. It is the most important part of the whole sequence. Pull back, breathe, still, release. Every elite athlete knows this. Every great musician knows this. The rest is where the power loads. The silence is where the note means something. The pause is where the punch gets its weight behind it. The Stoics built their entire philosophy around this idea. Action matters. Virtue matters. Doing the work absolutely matters. But without the internal stillness to know why you are doing it, what you actually value, what kind of person you are becoming through the process, all of that action is just noise with a schedule. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, reportedly said very little in conversation and was mocked for it by people who mistook his silence for emptiness. He responded, and this is one of the sharpest things ever said in ancient Greece, that he had nothing to say yet because he had not yet finished listening. Not to others, to himself. In a world that rewards the loudest voice and the fastest take and the most content and the most output, the person who knows how to be genuinely still is not falling behind. They are building something the noisemakers cannot touch. Depth, clarity, an unshakable foundation that does not crack the first time life gets hard. You do not need more productivity hacks. You do not need a better morning routine. You do not need another framework or system or 30-day challenge. You need to sit down, shut the noise off, and actually meet yourself, maybe for the first time. The Stoics did not become legendary by doing more than everyone else. They became legendary by knowing exactly when to stop. And in that stopping they found something the rest of the world was too busy to notice. Everything they actually needed was already there. If this hit different from the usual philosophy content you have seen, that is because it was designed to drop a comment with one word that describes how you feel right now. Just one word, no explanations. Let us see what this actually stirred up. And if you know someone who is burning themselves out, chasing everything and finding nothing, send this to them. Not with a message, just send it. They will know why. See you in the next one.